Now we'll talk about slope a little more in detail, and the first thing we're going to cover is the difference between parallel or perpendicular slopes. And also, of course, two lines might be neither perpendicular nor parallel, so we'll run into that case as well. So if two lines are parallel, that means that those lines have the same slope. If one line's slope is 4, the other line's slope is 4. So exact same number, same sign. If one line's slope is -1/2, the other line's slope is -1/2. So we have an example of parallel lines down here. You can see that these two lines have an identical slope of 2, right? So there's the two equations, y equals 2x plus 3, y equals 2x minus 4. They both have that common slope equal to 2. Parallel lines have the same exact slope. And furthermore, parallel lines will never intersect. Or if we look over to our example on the right, we have two lines that have what are called perpendicular slopes. Perpendicular lines with slopes that are negative reciprocals. So lines that are perpendicular have negative reciprocal slopes. So when I see this terminology, negative reciprocal, sometimes students get confused by this. It doesn't mean that a perpendicular slope will always have a negative sign in front of it. When we say negative, we mean different sign. So if one slope is positive, the other slope would be negative. If your first slope is negative, the second slope would be positive, because the negative of that negative slope would be positive. So the first thing I want to check, if I think that I might have perpendicular lines, is I want to make sure that my slopes have two different signs, one positive and one negative. And the second thing I want to check is that the slopes are reciprocal to each other. Okay, so make sure that the two numbers are reciprocals, that one is the flipped version of the other. So looking down here at our right-hand example, I have y equals -1/2 x, so the slope is -1/2. Then I have y equals 2x minus 2, so the slope is +2. So doing our check, -1/2 versus 2, I do have two different signs, negative versus positive, and I do have reciprocals. 1/2 flipped over will be 2, the reciprocal of that would be 1/2. So I meet both requirements, so I know that I have perpendicular lines. And specifically, perpendicular lines on a graph do intersect, and they specifically intersect at a right angle. So to make this perfect plus sign, when they intersect, they create this perfect 90-degree angle. All right, so in number 1, it says determine whether the following lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So if the lines are parallel, they have exactly the same slopes. If they're perpendicular, they will have slopes that are negative reciprocals of each other. And if they're neither, then they're just going to have some blend of those two. All right, so in A, y equals 2x plus 5 and y equals -2x plus 3, I can pull out the slopes right away. Slope of my first line is 2, slope of my second line is -2. So I can see that these are not parallel lines. They're not parallel because the slopes are different. One's a 2, one's a -2. And they're also not perpendicular. They're also not perpendicular. I do have the two different signs. That's one thing that I check for. So I do have two different signs, +2 versus -2. But when I go to check for reciprocals, I don't have reciprocals. If one's a 2, the other should be a 1/2, and I don't have that. So that means these are also not perpendicular. Because it's neither of those, I say neither. All right, for B, my first equation is already solved for y, so I can tell that its slope is -2. For my second equation, I need to solve this for y first to find its slope. So I end up with y equals -2x plus 11. Slope of this line is -2. So comparing -2 to -2, these are exactly the same. This tells me that I have parallel lines. Now moving on to C, I have x equals 3 and y equals 4. For x equals 3, I know if I graph this, I would graph a vertical line. And I know that for any vertical line, the slope is undefined. And for y equals 4, if I graph this, I would graph a horizontal line. And the slope equals 0. Right, so I can't use my usual tricks. They're definitely not the same, so I'm confident that these guys are not parallel lines because the slopes would either both be undefined or both equal 0. That's not the case, but possibly they're perpendicular. So to see this, I would recommend actually looking at a graph of these two. So if I toss up a quick axis, so let's see, x equals 3, my vertical line looks like this, and y equals 4, horizontal line looks like this. And I can see that when I graph these guys, I'm creating that nice right angle. So these two are perpendicular. So any vertical and horizontal line will be perpendicular to each other. And along the same lines, 2 vertical lines will be parallel and 2 horizontal lines will also be parallel. All right, and then when we get to D, I need to solve both of these for y to identify the slope. So for my top equation, 3y equals 2x plus 1, divide all the way across by 3. So I get y equals 2/3 x plus 1/3. So the slope of that first line is 2/3. And for my second equation, subtract 3x from both sides. 2y equals -3x plus 12. Divide all the way across by 2. I get y equals -3/2 x plus 6. I see the coefficient of x is -3/2, so that's my slope. So slope equals -3/2. So positive 2/3 versus -3/2. These definitely aren't identical, so I know I don't have parallel lines, but I might have perpendicular. So let's check for both of these. So do I have 2 different signs? I have positive 2/3 and I have -3/2, so I do have the 2 different signs. And I want to make sure these are reciprocals. If I flip 2/3, I get 3/2. If I flip 3/2, I get 2/3. So I do have my negative reciprocals, so this means that these are perpendicular.